Hi everyone, welcome back to the Luminous Group Process video series. Today we're going to be talking about a very important aspect of reaching excellence in manufacturing, and that is SPC. It's so important, it's actually been identified as one of the 5 core tools. So today I have Murray Sitsimer, the founder of the Luminous Group, on to talk a little bit about SPC. So
Hey,
Murray,
Rich.
maybe you can start it out. What does SPC stand for, and what have you seen SPC used for in the past?
Well, it's a 3-letter acronym that stands for Statistical Process Control. And when you think about it, those words are pretty descriptive. So statistical, even though we might have really not liked statistics back in college, deals with numbers. How do you see patterns in numbers, and how can you examine a population of numbers and make some conclusions? Different ways to do that. Rich, the really nice thing is there's so much software out there nowadays that you don't have to get back to those formulas that were a little troubling. But the concepts of those formulas are what allows the process control part to be so powerful. Process is what you're applying it to, right? We're not applying this to where stars are in the solar system or what the odds are at the casino. We're looking at repetition of something over and over again, like manufacturing, and we want to control it. Controlling it means we want to have a predictable place where that's going to be, and where we want it to be is well within the upper and lower specification limits. And we're not just going to measure the part itself. That's why some people think that it's statistical product control, because the product is really the result of the process settings, the process techniques.
So we're going to use this to measure the inputs rather than the outputs. Is that what you're saying?
That's exactly right. The outputs, it's a little bit too late. It'll tell you you've got a problem if you're looking at the outputs, and a lot of people do apply it, but most of the power of statistical process control is to keep the process in line. So when I say between upper and lower spec limits, that should be well defined for maybe speeds and feeds when you change tools, temperatures, in injection molding, it might be pressures. So if you can control all the variables that are important, right, not the trivial many, but the critical few, if you could control those process parameters, then we know that the product will be consistent. Now we're going to apply statistical process control maybe to measure, for example, pressure might be a great example. If we see pressure over time creeping, trending, before it gets to the point where we could be producing a non-conforming part, we could be alerted and take appropriate action. Is it just troubleshooting? Do we need to change the adjustment? Maybe there's a problem with compressed air. Maybe we have to do some preventive maintenance. But the nice thing is, by looking at those inputs, Rich, then we are still producing conforming parts and can react to a process change.
So this really gives me some optimism here, Murray, because you're telling me that this is going to allow me to shift my focus from being reactive to proactive.
Great concept, isn't it? Right? Think about when you're in a reactive management and you're measuring parts, and then you find parts are non-conforming. Well, now you got your hands full, right, of scrap, product that needs to be reworked. If you don't catch it all, you got customer complaints, right? This is a very expensive way to run a business, and many companies run that way. But that's why you have really tight margins, and eventually you have companies that go out of business. To be right, the opposite, right? To be a healthy company, you want to be proactive, and that means don't wait and look at your parts. Look at your process, monitor your process, and apply these statistical concepts that are not that difficult.
So you mentioned early on that this is actually a visual control. What are some of the visual tools that are used in SPC?
Well, that's really the nice thing about statistics is, yeah, you've got numbers and you've got calculations, but the net of it is if you can make that data visible. So remember the old histogram, the bell-shaped curve, right? That shows you the spread. So if you're looking at the data, let's go back to pressure, and you're measuring it over a shift or over a week, you're going to develop a histogram. There's variation in everything, so that might bounce around, but most of them will center around a center value. If you see that that population is shifting, why? Right? So now we could start to troubleshoot. Another chart might be a control chart where you're plotting the individual data over time. And you would expect, because of variation, that will bounce a little bit among the mean above center value. But if you start to see a trend, people often talk about consecutive points on one side of the mean. Well, why is it no longer bouncing? That means there was a change in the process. Gives us a chance, a heads up, to react to it ahead of time before that impacts production.
You know, I'm gonna tell a little story, or let you in on a little bit of Murray's life. Murray is so interesting that he is friends with a couple that are both PhD in statistics. Okay, and so one thing I want to mention is that the Luminous Group uses those PhDs in statistics to back up our work in things like statistical process control. And so, Murray, although you mentioned that there's a lot of software out there, surprisingly, having worked with some of these PhDs in statistics, some of the software actually isn't good. It actually does some of the calculations wrong. And what it does is it just reinterprets some of the assumptions that were made to allow people to do hand calculations into computers when it could be much more accurate. So we really do suggest, if you're going to use software for this, that you consider the software very carefully and review the software to make sure that it is accurate. So
That's interesting because I mentioned like a bell-shaped curve, and a lot of times to make things simple, we make assumptions that everything follows what would be a normal distribution, right?
yeah,
Half on the left, half on the right. But the real world, that doesn't always happen, right? Because of maybe toolware, because of maybe the mechanisms that are involved, or maybe it's one-sided, right? That it can't go on a negative and it's only a positive. So
right.
the proper prescription is really important. But the nice thing is that's only a one-time thing, right? To set up how are you going to monitor the process, and then you hold it in place.
So Maury, getting back to this, if you sum up SPC, what's the most important thing that people can remember about SPC?
Use the numbers, use the facts to give you a proactive view of the process.
A proactive view of the process. Let's keep that in mind. So Murray, if people would like to get some help with SPC, particularly if they have some of these complex situations like you talked about, one-sided or non-normal curves, where can they contact the Luminous Group to get help with some of that?
Right. Well, sure. I'd like to start off with a phone call. Easiest way to reach us would be through the website, where you get more information, including some blog articles and some references. Our website is www.luminousgroup.com. That's LUMINOUSGROUP.com. And the phone number is 248-538-8677.
And by the way, if you contact us, you even get to hear interesting stories about two statisticians going to the casino and trying to beat the casino counting cards. So that's the way they use their statistical background and got PhD. I'm sure their parents are very proud. Murray, have a great afternoon. I'll talk to you soon.
Sounds good. Thanks, Rich. Nice to talk with you.